So we've read every line in Labour's 100-page manifesto and condensed all of that down into today's video. This video is brought to you by Mogul News. Get a free trial of their amazing news aggregation service by using our special URL. There's a link to that down below. Labour's manifesto is broken down into 5 broad sections: a green industrial revolution, rebuild our public services, tackle poverty and inequality, the final say on Brexit, and a new internationalism. Let's run through all 5, starting from the beginning. Labour propose kickstarting a green industrial revolution, which will create 1 million jobs in the UK. They'll launch a national transformation fund of £400 billion, £250 billion of which will directly fund the transition through a green transformation fund. They'll also rewrite the Treasury's rules to guarantee that every penny spent is compatible with our climate and environmental targets. When it comes to energy, they'll deliver nearly 90% of electricity and 50% of heat from renewable and low-carbon sources by 2030. They'll do this by building 7,000 new offshore wind turbines, 2,000 new onshore wind turbines, enough solar panels to cover 22,000 football pitches, and upgrade almost all of the UK's 27 million homes to the highest energy efficiency standards, reducing the average household energy bill by £417 per person per year by 2030, and eliminating fuel poverty. As well as that, they'll immediately and permanently ban fracking, as well as introducing a windfall tax on oil companies, so that the companies that knowingly cause damage to our climate will help cover the costs. They also say that the supply arms of the big 6 energy companies will be brought into public ownership. Labour also pledged to create an innovation nation, setting a target of 3% of GDP to be set on research and development by 2030. When it comes to transport, they propose introducing free bus travel for under 25s, as well as bringing railways back into public ownership, using options including franchise expiry. They also support a long-term investment plan, including delivering CROSSRAIL for the north and completing the full HS2 route to Scotland. Labour commit to ending new sales of combustion engine vehicles by 2030, and also propose introducing a new right to food, as well as establishing a National Food Commission. In the public services section, Labour say they'll reverse some of the cuts to corporation tax, while keeping rates lower than in 2010. Labour also say they'll ask those who earn more than £80,000 per year to pay a little more in income tax, while freezing national insurance and income tax rates for everyone else. Labour also promised to launch the biggest ever crackdown on tax avoidance and evasion, and reform the inefficient system of tax reliefs. They also say that in the public sector they'll enforce a maximum pay ratio of 20:1 and restore public sector pay to at least pre-financial crisis levels in real terms by delivering year-on-year above inflation pay rises, starting with a 5% increase. For health, Labour say that they'll increase expenditure across the health sector by an average 4.3% a year, as well as saying they'll end and reverse privatisation in the NHS. Labour also promised to provide free annual NHS dental checkups, as well as more than double the annual spending on children and adolescent mental health services. Labour also promised to extend the sugar tax to milk drinks and ban fast food restaurants near schools, as well as enforcing stricter rules around the advertising of junk food and levels of salt. They also say that they'll abolish prescription charges in England, as well as extending maternity leave to 12 months. For education, Labour say that within 5 years, all 2, 3 and 4-year-olds will be entitled to 30 hours of free preschool education per week, as well as access to additional hours at affordable subsidised rates, staggered with incomes. They also say that they'll ensure that schools are properly resourced, with increased long-term funding, as well as ending the high-stakes testing culture of schools by scrapping Key Stage 1 and 2 SATs, as well as baseline assessments. On top of that, Labour say they'll bring free schools and academies back under public control, and replace Ofsted and transfer their responsibilities for inspections to a new body designed to drive school improvement. They also say they'll ask the Social Justice Commission to advise on integrating private schools. Labour say they'll give everyone free lifelong entitlement to training up to level 3, and 6 years of training at levels 4 to 6. They'll also abolish tuition fees and bring back maintenance grants. For the police, Labour say they'll re-establish neighbourhood policing and recruit 2,000 more frontline officers than had been planned by the Conservatives. Labour also promised to revive the high streets by stopping bank branch closures, banning ATM charges, and giving local government new powers to put empty shops to good use. Labour also say they'll bring the Royal Mail back to public ownership at the earliest opportunity. They guarantee that every young person will have access to local, high-quality youth work, as well as saying they'll invest in the fire and rescue service, recruiting at least 5,000 new firefighters. Labour also promised to deliver free, full-fibre broadband by 2030. They'll do this by establishing British Broadband, and by bringing the broadband-relevant parts of BT back into public ownership. They also say that they'll invest in towns and communities neglected for too long, with a £1 billion cultural capital fund to transform libraries, museums and galleries across the country. They'll also consult with the media sector and trade unions to establish an inquiry into the fake news undermining trust. For poverty and inequality, Labour say that they'll rapidly introduce a real living wage of at least £10 per hour for all workers aged 16 and over. They also promise that up to 10% of a company will be owned collectively by employees, with dividend payments distributed equally among all. Labour also promised to explore a pilot of universal basic income, as well as ending bogus self-employment and creating a single status of worker for everyone apart from those genuinely self-employed in business. As well as that, Labour say they'll ban 0 hours contracts and ban unpaid internships. Labour promised that within a decade we will have reduced the average full-time weekly working hours to 32 hours across the economy, with no loss of pay, funded by productivity increases. Labour promised to create a new department for women and equalities, with a full-time Secretary of State, and say that they'll provide sufficient funding for schools to deliver mandatory LGBT+ inclusive relationships and sex education. Labour promised to scrap universal credit, implementing an emergency package of reforms to mitigate some of the worst features of universal credit, while Labour developed their replacement system. They'll introduce a £1 billion fire safety fund to fit sprinklers and other fire safety measures in all high-rise council and housing association tower blocks, enforcing the replacement of dangerous Grenfell-style cladding in all high-rise homes and buildings. They say that by the end of Parliament, they'll be building an annual rate of at least 1,500 council and social homes, with 1,000 of these built by councils for social rent. Labour also wants to stop runaway rents by capping them with inflation, and give cities powers to cap rents further. They also say they'll earmark an additional £1 billion a year for councils' homelessness services. Labour say they'll act immediately to end the hereditary principle of the House of Lords, and work to abolish the House of Lords in favour of an elected Senate of Nations and Regions. Labour wants to reduce the voting age to 16, giving full voting rights to UK residents, and introduce a system of automatic voter registration. They say they'll work quickly and tirelessly to secure the return of a genuine power-sharing government in Northern Ireland, as well as fully implementing the new laws on equal marriage in Northern Ireland, so that same-sex couples are no longer treated as second-class citizens. Labour also say they will not agree to a Section 30 order request if it comes from the Scottish Government, essentially ruling out an independence referendum. In their Brexit section, Labour promised that within 3 months of coming to power, a Labour government will secure a sensible deal, and then within 6 months, they'll put that deal to a public vote alongside the option to remain. Labour outlined their deal, saying that it will include a permanent and comprehensive UK-wide customs union, close alignment with the single market, dynamic alignment on workers' rights, consumer rights and environmental protections, a continued participation in EU agencies and funding programmes, and clear commitments on future security arrangements. In their final section, New Internationalisation, Labour promised to conduct an audit of the impact of Britain's colonial legacy, to understand our contribution to the dynamics of violence and insecurity across regions previously under British colonial rule. Labour say that they'll immediately suspend the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia for use in Yemen, and to Israel for arms used in violation of the human rights of Palestinian civilians. They also say that they'd appoint a human rights advisor to work across the Foreign Office and government to prioritise a coordinated approach to human rights. Labour say they support the renewal of the Trident nuclear deterrent, as well as committing to spend at least 2% of GDP on defence. So that's Labour's manifesto. What do you think of their policies? Let us know in the comments below. This video was brought to you by Mogul News. Mogul News handpicks stories from some of the world's leading newspapers, including The Economist, FT, The Times, Bloomberg and more, allowing you to get up to speed fast with daily briefings or dive into topics you're interested in, with handpicked premium ad-free content from prestigious journalists from across the political divide. You could think of it as the Netflix of news. To find out more and get an exclusive discount on Mogul News or even a free trial, click our exclusive link below. Be sure to subscribe if you want more Manifesto videos and election updates. You can also hit the bell icon if you want to be notified every time we release a video. And you can find more from us across all social networks simply by searching for TLDR News. And finally, if you want your name featured at the end of the videos, just like these people, then be sure to back us on Patreon. There's a link to that in the description.